Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih, kama yuhibbu rabbuna wa yarda. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah, وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الناصح الأمين. اللهم صل على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. ثم أما بعد. الحمد لله على نعمة الإسلام والسنة. All thanks and praise belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guiding us to Islam and for guiding us to the Sunnah. It is indeed a ni'mah and a bounty. Bismillah ta'ala, we would like to begin today going over a tremendous book. A book which is small in size, but it is tremendous in the meanings and the benefits that are contained therein. It is a book that everyone should have inside of their libraries. It is a book that I encourage everyone, Bismillah ta'ala, to read through it. And in particular, those who are attendants inside of this class, then we require that they memorize it. Bismillah ta'ala. It is important that when we sit down with anything from knowledge, that we take it serious. Especially those affairs that are fard ayn. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded us, as it comes in a hadith that has been collected by Imam Ibn Majah, rahimahullahu ta'ala. And it's from the hadith of Anas bin Malik, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. That seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. Again, this hadith has been collected by Imam Ibn Majah, rahimahullah ta'ala. And the narrator of the hadith is Anas bin Malik, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Imam al-Wadi'i, Imam Muqbil, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that at the very least one should memorize from a hadith is the text of the hadith along with the Sahabi who narrated that hadith and where that hadith is collected. That this is the minimum that a person should memorize when it comes to a hadith. And that is the narrator of the hadith itself, and where it's collected. And this is important, inshallah ta'ala, and this is why we mention these three aspects. So we want everyone to have this inside of their notes, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, so that they may commit it to memory, knowing its narrator and where it is collected. Ala kulli hal, we have to take the knowledge seriously, because we are fulfilling or attempting to fulfill the command of the Prophet ﷺ in seeking the knowledge of this deen of al-Islam. And the ulama, they explain that what is meant here by seeking knowledge, it is a seeking of knowledge of those things that are fard ayn, those things that are an individual responsibility, and they are binding upon each and every individual. وَبِلَا شَكْ وَبِلَا رَيْبٍ, there's no doubt about it that the affair of aqidah and manhaj is from those things that is binding upon every single Muslim. As the Fadilat Sheikh Salih Abdis Ali Sheikh Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he mentions that taqleed la yanfa' fi bab al-aqidah. That taqleed, blind following, it does not benefit when it comes to the issue of aqidah. At-taqleed la yanfa' fi bab al-aqidah. So therefore, we realize that when it comes to aqidah, and when aqidah is said, also minhaj is understood, because they go hand in hand. If there are deficiencies in the minhaj, then there will be deficiencies in the aqidah, and vice versa. Ala kulli hal, when it comes to the affairs of aqidah and minhaj, then we have to know them with the proofs and the evidences. We have to know them. Taqleed will not benefit. So hence we see from the standpoint that we have to study it. We have to learn. So it is important that we study and that we learn. And that we are serious when it comes to studying and serious when it comes to learning. Because those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them understanding of the religion, then this is a sign, a goodly sign for them. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants good for them. As it comes in Sahihain. As it comes in Sahihain. So the collector of this particular narration that we want to mention is Sahihain. Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And this is a reminder for those who know and to inform those who have yet to know that when it's mentioned Sahihain or fi Sahihain inside of the two collections of authentic hadith, what is intended by that is Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Naam, Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And this is from the hadith of Muawiyah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, that whoever Allah wants good for, He gives him understanding of the religion. And no doubt, to have understanding of the religion is only due to one having knowledge. وَإِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ, and verily knowledge, ilm, is by seeking it. A person, he has to seek it. He has to seek it out. Naam. So therefore, any type of gathering of ilm, I encourage myself first and foremost, and then I encourage all of you to take it very seriously, to be attentive, to be listening, to have with you a pen and a paper, to write down points of benefit and notes, and to write down the proofs and evidences that are mentioned. And then after that, to go back to your notes and revisit them and go over them and study them and so on and so forth. This is very important. We have to take it seriously. And never underestimate anything from knowledge by saying, oh, that is simple, or oh, that is easy, or oh, that is well known, and so on and so forth. As Sheikh Salih Abdis Ali Sheikh, he mentions that a person who does this, then he will miss out on much good. He will deprive himself from much good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside of His noble book, He says, إِنَّا سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. And this can be found in Surah Al-Muzammil and is verse number 5. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says what means, and verily we're going to send down to you, or we're going to send down upon you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a heavy word. قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. We're going to send down to you a heavy word. Naam. So we understand from this ayah here that the knowledge is heavy. There's nothing that is light or easy about it. Naam. But rather it is heavy. It requires attention. It requires that we look to it and that we know it and that we review it and so on and so forth and study and work hard. It's nothing that's just going to come upon ease like that. So you find that there is nothing from knowledge that is easy. There's nothing from knowledge that is easy, but rather knowledge requires attention. It requires that we are attentive and that we put forth much effort in order to establish it. Naam. And the benefits that one gains from ilm and from studying and taking everything seriously, as Shaykh Salih Hamd Aziz al-Shaykh he mentions, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he mentions, is that if one already knows something, and it says, paraphrasing what the Shaykh he said, not word for word, but if one already knows something, right, then by him going over it again, it just will increase his certainty. It will increase his certainty. So he benefits. And if he does not know something, then he will learn. So therefore he benefits. In any case, it will require great attention, and that is taken seriously, so that we may benefit, Bismillah ta'ala, either benefit by learning something new, or benefit by reinforcing something that we had known from before. But in any event, the reminder, it benefits the believer. So let us be serious about this, inshallah ta'ala. Also, we want to mention in this introduction here that the seeking of knowledge, it will take time. Person will gather it over the course of nights and days. It won't come all at one time. But if a person were to try to gather it all at one time, it will leave him. Now, a person will try to gather it all at one time, it will leave him. Like if a person sat down and he says, I'm going to memorize Sahih Bukhari all in one day, and he put forward a serious effort into memorizing it all in one day, a person will find that on the next day he would have very little memorized from Sahih Bukhari, if anything at all. He may have overloaded himself, right, to now he doesn't remember anything straight. You see? And this is as it comes in Kitab al-Jami', the famous statement, مَنْ رَامَ عِلْمٍ جُمْلَةً ذَهَبَ عَنْهُ جُمْلَةً, that whoever tries to take the knowledge all at one time, it will leave him all at once. Whoever tries to take the knowledge all at one time, it will leave him all at once. So it's important that we pace ourselves and that we take it bit by bit, because knowledge is gained over the course of days and nights. So we understand from this that an individual, he will seek knowledge from the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses him to seek the knowledge until the person is no longer alive, until the person dies. He will seek knowledge, and from the time that Allah has blessed him to begin to seek the knowledge until he dies. Because knowledge is gained over the course of days and nights. And the knowledge is vast. No one will encompass it all from the human beings. The knowledge is vast, so therefore he will have to strive and keep studying, and the studying never stops. How many of the biographies that we read of the great imams, that even upon their deathbed, they were going over a hadith. They were still learning, even upon their deathbed, moments before their death, they were still learning. And this is the way of knowledge, and those who truly understand the scope of knowledge is that they are constantly seeking it, they're constantly benefiting from their time, they're not wasting their time, but they're striving hard. So it is a must in our courage, especially the sisters, to strive hard. Because, walillah alhamd, many of the sisters, the majority of the sisters, they have a lot of free time, more free time than their spouses or their male counterparts. Being that the man has to divide his time in working and seeking after the halal provisions, right? Which will take away from the time that he has to study. So you will find that when you look and you examine the daily schedule of each, you will find that the women, they have more free time. They have more free time. And this is not to say that their job is easier because for me, I wouldn't have the ability to do what the sisters do. So we're not underestimating or trying to belittle their job, because their job is important. Their job is of great importance. And when it comes to the rectification of the ummah, their job, one may say, is even more important, because they are the teachers of the children. They are the rearers of the children, and they are the first educators of the children. And they put that firm foundation of Tawheed and Sunnah. Well, this is from their job. They're supposed to put that firm foundation of Tawheed and Sunnah and rear the children upon this. Now, so it is a must that the woman, she studies, because الْفَاقِدُ شَيْءٍ لَا يُعْطِيهِ, the one who is deprived of something, then he doesn't have the ability to give it. Now, so in order for her to rear the children upon this, she herself has to be upon this. عَلَى كُلِّ حَالٍ, when you look, the woman, she has a little more free time. And this is a bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's important that she fills that free time with benefits. She fills that free time with review of the Qur'an, reading of the Qur'an, contemplating the Qur'an, going over and reviewing the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, memorizing them, seeking to understand their meanings by reading the explanations from the ulama of this deen, as they explain the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, reviewing the notes from her classes and taking classes, and so on and so forth. Now, to strengthen herself, to strengthen her ilm. But we're mentioning this to say that this is a bounty that the sisters, they need to take advantage of, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and fill it with much good. Not with the tabloid culture, not with soap operas, and the likes of these foolish things, but that they fill it with that which will benefit them, benefit their families, and benefit the society as a whole. So they have to take this seriously. And from the taking of that seriously is that we have to become those who memorize. Now, we have to be of those who memorize. And this is why we require that everyone memorizes the text. They memorize the text. Because if they memorize the text of this tremendous book, then they'll always have the book with them. Always. As Imam al-Shafi'i, he mentions in his famous lines of poetry that the ilm, when a person memorizes it, is always with him. إِذَا كَانَ عِلْمِ فِي السُّوقِ فَعِلْمِ فِي السُّوقِ. He said that if I'm in the suq, then my knowledge is there with me in the suq. Why? Because his heart is the container that safeguards and memorizes that knowledge. Because his heart is a container that safeguards and memorizes that knowledge. And there's a famous statement from the ulama where it says, احفظ فإن كل حافظ إمام. It says, and memorize. Memorize. Because every imam was what? Was a great memorizer. Right? Memorize. Because every hafiz, a great memorizer, was what? Was the imam. So we understand that what? That the ai''imma, they are great memorizers. And this is something that is shared and something that they have in common. Is that the imams, you will find that they are great memorizers. Naam. So this is a key component. This is a key component and reaching success when it comes to knowledge, is that we have to be of those who are memorizing. Naam. Because that memorization, it will be a means to understanding. Right? It will be a means to understanding. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand what we are saying and misunderstand what we are advocating. We're not advocating that an individual just become a memorizer and that's it. But memorization, it will be a means by way in which a person will attain understanding. Right? It will be a means by way in which a person will attain understanding. And it's important that we keep it like this. Right? Is that it's important that we, yes, memorize, but also that we understand. Right? That we memorize and that we understand. You understand? And this is what we mean by that. So we encourage everyone to memorize, but also seek the knowledge and understand what you are carrying, understand what you have memorized, and act in accordance. Act in accordance. Now, the poet, he said, إِذَا لَمْ تَكُنْ حَافِظًا وَاعِيًا فَجَمْعُكَ لِلْعِلْمِ لَا يَنْفَعُ أَتَحْضُرُ بِالْجَهْلِ فِي مَجْلِسٍ وَعِلْمُكَ فِي الْكُتُبِ الْمُسْتَوْدَعُ. He said, if you do not become one who memorizes, nor one who safeguards the knowledge, meaning inside of his heart, right? He said, then your pursuit to gather knowledge, it will not benefit you. Then your pursuit to gather knowledge, it will not benefit you, or it will not benefit. He said, do you present yourself inside of the gathering with your, do you present yourself inside of the gathering with ignorance, right? Do you bring your ignorance to the gathering while your books are safely tucked, or while your knowledge, is safely tucked away in books? He said, do you present yourself with your ignorance inside of the gathering while your knowledge is safely tucked away in books? And this is the reality for those who are not memorizers. They can vaguely tell you about something, but then they have to return to their books so that they may tell you exactly. You understand? So they present themselves with what? With their ignorance inside of the gathering, while their knowledge is tucked away inside of books. Imam al-Shafi'i, which shows us why we have to fully take advantage of our time. Imam al-Shafi'i said a beautiful line of poetry where he said, كلما أدبني الدهر أراني نقص العقل وإذا ما ازددت علما زاد علما بجهلي. He said that every time I'm taught a lesson by time, every time I'm taught a lesson by time, I'm shown, or it shows me, the deficiency of my intellect. Because if I am not increasing in knowledge, then the knowledge is being increased by my ignorance. Meaning that if I'm not increasing in knowledge, right, then what? Or if my knowledge is not increasing, then my ignorance is increasing. Because see, there's going to be an increase and a decrease. You understand? There's going to be an increase and a decrease. The question is, what do you want that increase and decrease to be in? Do you want the knowledge to increase and the ignorance to decrease? Or do you want the ignorance to increase and the knowledge to decrease? Because this is the way of ilm. If you neglect things, then you will begin to forget them. You will begin to forget them. It's like the individual who memorized a surah, and then time goes by and they have neglected to review that surah, to recite the surah, and so on and so forth. What happens is that they'll come back and they have to relearn the surah all over again. Because now they have forgotten the surah. Either partially or in totality. Sometimes maybe they memorize, they still remember this ayah from over here and that ayah from over there. But for the most part, they got to memorize it all over again. Sometimes it comes and it's like they never memorized it before. They've forgotten everything. They have to start all over again. And this is the way. If we're not increasing in knowledge, then we're going to be decreasing in knowledge. Right? And if we're not increasing in knowledge and we are in fact decreasing in knowledge, this means we're going to be increasing in ignorance. So it's important. And I have no doubt that all of the attendants in his class, they have the ability to become better. وقال Abu Tayyib, he says in his lines of poetry, وَلَمْ أَرَى عُيُوبِ النَّاسِ عَيْبًا وَلَمْ أَرَى فِي عُيُوبِ النَّاسِ عَيْبًا كَنَقْصِ الْقَادِرِينَ عَلَى التَّمَامِ. Abu Tayyib, in this beautiful line of poetry, he said, وَلَمْ أَرَى فِي عُيُوبِ النَّاسِ. I have not seen from the mistakes of a people, عَيْبًا, a mistake, كَنَقْصِ الْقَادِرِينَ عَلَى التَّمَامِ, like the mistake or the deficiency of those who have the ability to become better, not becoming better. So from all of the deficiencies, all of the errors, all the mistakes that the mankind has, he said, I've not seen one that rivals the deficiency of those who have the ability to become better, not becoming better. So it is a must that inshallah ta'ala everyone explores their potential. And they push it. And they push it. And they push themselves to learn. and they push themselves towards that which is good. Bismillah ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala, we want to look at the beginning of this tremendous, outstanding book of Qawa'id al-Arba'. And it's important that we get some background on this tremendous book by the Imam, the Mujaddid Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala. وقال العلامة شيخ صالح الفوزان حفظه الله تعالى هذه القواعد الأربع. He said in this book القواعد الأربع التي ألفها شيخ الإسلام محمد بن عبد الوهاب, which was written by the Shaykh of Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala. It is important to know that the book that we're studying is called Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba'. Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba'. Arba', it means the four. Right? Al-Qawa'id, shortly we're going to come to it, inshallah ta'ala. Before that, the Shaykh he mentions here Risala Mustaqilla, that it is a separate book. That this tremendous book, Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba', it is in fact a separate book. It is a book all by itself. نعم. ولكنها تطبع مع ثلاثة الأصول or مع ثلاثة الأصول. He said, but you will find that it is often printed along with the three fundamental principles or thalathatul usul. Many of the times when you find the mutun, you will find your thalathatul usul, and then after it you will find al-qawa'id al-arba'. Naam. So a lot of people, they mistakenly think that these two are actually one book, and that qawa'id al-arba' is the end of thalathatul usul. But the reality is that they are two separate works. They are two separate works. Naam. The Shaykh he mentions why they are printed together. He said that usually you find that they are printed together, ثلاثة الأصول والقواعد الأربع من أجل الحاجة إليها, because of the tremendous need that people have for them. لتكون في متناول أيدي طلبة العلم, so that the students of knowledge will have access to them, right? Because these are books that for the one who's seeking knowledge, right? And who is the one who's seeking knowledge? Who is the one? Everyone should be saying to themselves, us, inshallah, us, right? We're striving to seek the knowledge. So with that being the case, the Shaykh he's mentioning that for the student of knowledge, he has to what? He needs these two books. He needs Thalathatul Usul and he needs Al-Qawa'id Al-Arba'. So we advise everyone with these two books and of all of the books authored by the great Imam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, the likes of Kitab al-Tawheed, wa Kashf al-Shubuhat, and so on and so forth. Back to the title, the Shaykh says, Al-Qawa'id, Naam, Al-Qawa'id, Naam, so that's Alif, Lam, Qaf, Waw, Alif, Ain, Dal, طيب. Al-Qawa'id, Jam' is the plural of Qa'idah. Al-Qawa'id is the plural of Qa'idah. طيب. So the singular is Qa'idah, which is Qaf, or if you put Al-Qa'idah, Alif, Lam, Qaf, Alif, Ain, Dal, Ta marbuta. طيب. So is Al-Qa'idah. That's the singular. The plural is Al-Qawa'id. So if you take the Alif and the Lams off, you have Qa'idah and قواعد. So قواعد is the plural of قاعدة. والقاعدة هي الأصل الذي يتفرع عنه مسائل كثيرة أو فروع كثيرة. That the meaning of قاعدة, right? Then it means a foundation, right? Of which many things or many different issues will branch out from it. It is a foundation that many different issues, they will branch out from it, right? Or of many subsidiary branches will spring out from it. So it's a foundation by way in which other issues will spring out from it, or other branches and subsidiary aspects will branch out and extend from it. And this is why it has been translated as the four fundamental principles, right? The four fundamental principles. Because this is what's understood by the word al-qawa'id. Al-qawa'id, that these are things that are what? They're principles, yes, but they're fundamental principles. Because remember, al-qa'idah, it is the asl, the foundation, right? The foundation. But yeah. So this is why it is translated as the four fundamental principles. The Shaykh, he says that these particular principles, مضمونة هذه القواعد الأربع التي ذكرها شيخ الإسلام محمد بن عبد الوهاب رحمه الله تعالى معرفة التوحيد ومعرفة الشرك. That these four fundamental principles, and what the Shaykh he mentioned, ذكرها الشيخ, he mentions, then they are connected to knowing or having some knowledge on what is tawheed, and having some knowledge and knowing about shirk. So the subject of the particular book is dealing with tawheed and shirk, right? It's dealing with tawheed and shirk. And this is of extreme importance, because this is where we start, right? This is where we start. That we have to know the importance of tawheed so that we may implement it, and we have to know what is the dangers of shirk so that we stay away from it. Right? And the Shaykh, he says, وَمَا هَذِهِ قَاعِدَةٌ فِي التَّوْحِيدِ وَمَا هِيَ الْقَاعِدَةُ فِي التَّوْحِيدِ. And what is the principle of tawheed? وَمَا هِيَ قَاعِدَةٌ فِي الشِّرْكِ. And what are the fundamental principles of a shirk? نعم. لأن كثير الناس, because many of the people, نعم, they have gone astray in these particular two affairs. Many of the people, they have gone astray in these particular two affairs. يتخبطون في معنى التوحيد ما هو ويتخبطون في معنى الشرك وكل يفسرهما على حسب هواه. He said many of the people have strayed with regards to the meaning of tawheed. They have strayed with regard to what is the meaning of a shirk. And every one of them, they try to explain them from their own desires. They try to explain them from their own desires. The Shaykh, he says, وَلَكِنَ الْوَاجِبْ أَنَّنَا نَرْجِعْ فِي تَقْعِيدِنَا إِلَى الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ. He said, but what is wajib upon us, and what we have to do, and what is upon us, is that we must return with regards to our aqidah to the book and the sunnah. As we mentioned before, the aqidah is not learned or taken from taqleed, but we have to know with proofs and evidences from the book and the sunnah. The Shaykh, he says, ليكون هذه التقعيد تقعيدا صحيحا سليما مأخوذا من كتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He says, so that our aqidah and our belief is correct, it is free from error, and is that which is taken from the book of Allah and the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Especially في هذين الأمرين العظيمين التوحيد والشرك. He said, especially in these two great affairs of التوحيد and of shirk. طيب. And it's important to know, as the Shaykh, he mentions here, والشيخ رحمه الله تعالى لم يذكر هذه القواعد ما عنده. The Shaykh, he says, and the Shaykh Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, he didn't mention these rules, these fundamental principles from himself. أو من فكره, or just from his thinking and his intellectual pursuits. كما يفعل ذلك كثير من المتخبطين. He said, like many of the astray people, they do. They speak about things based upon their desires or based upon their own intellectual pursuits and so on and so forth. And this is not correct. The Shaykh Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, he did not do this. إنما أخذ هذه القواعد من كتاب الله ومن سنة الرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وسيرته. He said, but rather, the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala, he took these principles from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah and from his biography, from his life. And this is important. And it shows you and gives you an indication of the importance and the true value of seerah, of studying the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, so that we know what he was upon. It helps us better understand the life of the Prophet ﷺ and what he was upon from aqidah, from ibadah, from suluk, from his beliefs, from his worship, from his character, so that what? So we may better imitate him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رُسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. And verily you have for you, the Messenger of Allah, the most excellent of example. Right? The most excellent of example. Naam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوا وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. And whatever the Messenger gives you, take it. And whatever he prevents you from, then stay away from it. Naam. So it's a must that we strive hard to imitate that which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was upon. This is a must. And it's a must that we look to his sunnah and look to his seerah. Ala kullin, the Imam, he took these principles from the book and the sunnah. From the book and the sunnah. Naam. فَإِذَا عَرَفْتَ هَذِهِ الْقَوَاعِدِ. So he said, so if you were to know about these fundamental principles, and فهمتها, and you understood them, سهل عليك بعد ذلك معرفة التوحيد. He said, then it will be easy upon you after that to know about Tawheed. الذي بعث الله به الرسل. That which Allah Ta'ala, he sent his messengers with. Naam. That which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sent his rusul. He sent his messengers, rusulahu bit-tawheed. He sent them with tawheed. وَأَنزَلَ بِهِ كُتُبَهُ. And he revealed his books to teach the people what is it, tawheed, and to warn them from what is shirk. The Shaykh, he says, وَمَعْرِفَةُ الشِّرْكِ الَّذِي حَذَّرَ اللَّهُ مِنْهُ وَبَيَّنَ خَطَرُهُ وَضَرَرُهُ. He said, and also that they will know about shirk, that which Allah, he has warned them from, and he has explained its danger, and he has explained its harm. وَالضَّرَرَ. He has explained the harm of it. Naam. The harm of it fi dunya wal akhirah. The harm of it inside of this world and in the next. وَهَذَا أَمْرٌ مُهِمٌّ جِدًّا. And it is a tremendously important affair. وَهُوَ أَلْزَمُ عليك من معرفة أحكام الصلاة. And the Shaykh, he says, وَهُوَ أَلْزَمُ. And it's very important that the knowing of what is Tawheed, so that you may act upon it, and knowing what is shirk, so you may stay away from it. The Shaykh, he says that knowing this, أَلْزَمُ عليك. It is more binding upon you. Right? It is more binding upon you than knowing من معرفة أحكام الصلاة والزكاة والعبادات وسائر الأمور الدينية. Is more important than knowing the rules and regulations of the prayer, of charity, and all of the acts of worship, right? And act of worship and the affairs of the deen. That knowing about what is Tawheed, so you may implement it, and knowing about what is shirk, so you may stay away from it, is more important. Is more important than every other aspect and every other rules and regulations of ibadat. And the reason for this is quite clear, because if a person is upon shirk, as we're going to come to inshallah ta'ala throughout the course of the book, if a person is on the shirk, then his deeds don't count. They're done, they don't count. So even if he prayed correctly, if shirk entered into that prayer, the prayer doesn't count. Even if he gave his sadaqah, his zakat correctly, if shirk came into that, it don't count. It's done, doesn't count. So when he understands, or he may start to see where the shaykh is coming from by saying this, that knowing about at-tawheed and shirk is more important than the rules and regulations of the salah and zakat and all of the ibadat. Now, this is not to say that one, he turns away and says, okay, I got to learn about salat because, I'm studying tawheed. No. It is important that he understands what takes precedence, right? But at the same time, he still got to pray correctly. He still got to fast correctly, and so on and so forth. But it's important that he understand what takes precedence. What takes precedence. طيب. The Shaykh, he says, لأن هذا هو الأمر. He said, because this is the affair that is the asas. Because this affair, it is the foundation. This is what comes first. Al-awwali. This is what comes first. And this is the foundation, knowing about the tawheed and establishing the tawheed. Right? The Shaykh says, لأن الصلاة والزكاة والحج وغيرها من العبادات لا تصح إذا لم تبنى على أصل العقيدة الصحيحة. He said, because the prayer, the charity, the hajj, and other than it from the acts of worship, they are not correct unless they are built upon the foundation of the correct aqidah. Let's say built upon the foundation of the correct aqidah. They're not built upon the correct aqidah, then they don't count. The Shaykh, he says, وَهِيَ التَّوْحِيدُ الْخَالِصُ لِلَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ, and that is the tawheed that is sincerely for Allah Azza wa Jal. وقد قدم رحمه الله تعالى هذه القواعد الأربع بمقدمة عظيمة. And the Imam, he has put a tremendous introduction to these four fundamental principles. Tremendous introduction. And bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, we're going to take our time in going through this outstanding book. Bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. We're going to take our time in going through this tremendous book. So we'll go through it bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, point by point, inshallah ta'ala. And also, by doing it like this, it lends an opportunity to the one who is memorizing it to at the very least memorize it as with the flow of the class. In other words, as we come to a point, make sure you have that point and everything that came before it memorized. So going through it at that slow pace, right, it will allow you to memorize and to keep up with the memorization. Also, and that's a good thing, right? Also, it also cuts off the excuse that you couldn't do it. It also cuts off the excuse you couldn't do it. You understand? Because now you should have already started to memorize it already. Okay? Now even now here on the first class, we didn't even start to mention the text of the book yet. Right? So you should have a week or at least or two, a jump with regard to your memorization, inshallah ta'ala. Ala kullin, the Imam, he begins the book with the Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And it's important, and it is a wisdom why he began the book as such. وقال العلامة الإمام عثيمين رحمه الله تعالى with regards to the Bismillah. And it's important that you know, he said the Bismillah والجار والمجرور متعلق بمحذوف فعل مؤخر مناسب للمقام تقديره. He said that you have a jar and a majroor because it comes bi ism, the jar and then the majroor. And he says what is intended by that jar wa majroor, that jar wa majroor, it is connected to something that has been removed. It has been removed from the sentence, means something that is not articulated, but it is understood. Something that is implied. And he said, and that thing that is understood and it is implied, it is put to the back. Right? It is put to the back. Or is put to the end of the sentence. And it will fit the occasion. It will be appropriate and suitable for the occasion in question. So in this particular case, the Shaykh, he says, taqdiru, what is implied here is, Bismillah aktubu, aw usannifu. That in the name of Allah, I am writing, yani meaning this book, or I am authoring this book, for lack of a better translation. Right? In the name of Allah, I am writing this book, or I'm authoring this book. And it's important to know, as the Shaykh, he says, وَقَدَرْنَاهُ فِعْلًا, and that we have said it is a fi'l. That is implied is a fi'l, or it is a verb. That it is a verb. لأن الأصل في العمل الأفعال, because the origin in actions are what? Verbs. The origin in actions, then they are verbs. طيب? So again, we're speaking about what? That which has been put or implied at the end of the sentence. That it is a verb. Firstly, it is a verb. It's not a noun, but it's a verb. If someone were to ask you, why is it a verb and it's not a noun, for example, then you will reply, as the Shaykh mentioned, because the origin of actions are verbs. The origin of actions are verbs. When you want to describe an action, then you utilize verbs. You utilize what? Verbs. Naam. طيب. So this is why it is a verb. We say it is a verb that has been implied at the end of the sentence. The Shaykh says, وَقَدَّرْنَاهُ مُؤَخِّرًا, and we said that it is implied at the end of the sentence. Right? It is implied at the end of the sentence. Why is it implied at the end of the sentence? وَقَدَرْنَا مُؤَخِّرًا. Why? The Shaykh says, لِفَائِدَتَيْن. In other words, how come it is Bismillah usannifu and not usannifu Bismillah? How come it is I am, in the name of Allah, I am authoring the book, and not I am authoring the book in the name of Allah? You understand? Because both sentences are correct in the Arabic language. Both sentences are correct. However, this particular inferred verb comes at the end of the sentence due to two reasons, two benefits, right? So therefore it is Bismillah usannifu. In the name of Allah, I'm authoring this book for two important reasons. The first reason, at-tabarruk, is seeking blessings. Is seeking blessings by the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At-tabarruk, Bismillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first reason why it is in the name of Allah I'm authoring is seeking blessings. Seeking blessings by putting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. Nah, that's the first reason. The second reason, and this is very important, إفادة الحصر. لأن التقديم المتعلق يفيد الحصر. The Shaykh says the second reason is to bring about a restrictedness. To bring about a restrictedness, Right? He says because when you bring forward that which has been connected to, right, then you understand from it a restrictedness. Because remember we said that the jar wa majroor is connected, right, to a verb that is implied at the end of the sentence that has been removed from articulation. Right? If that makes sense, I'm going to repeat it again, inshallah ta'ala. In the beginning we said that the jar and the majroor is connected, right, to a implied verb that comes at the end of the sentence that is suitable to the occasion. So in any event, by bringing that forward, Bismillah, in the name of Allah, that implies a restrictedness. That implies a restrictiveness, or we understand from it a restrictiveness, meaning that we begin, or in the name of Allah, we begin, and in no one else's name, only Allah's name. This is what it means, al-hasr, restrictiveness here in this context, is that in the name of Allah, I am writing, in what? In only in Allah's name, no one else's name, only in Allah's name, only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what is implied, or this is what is understood by the grammatical construction. This is what the grammatical construction leads you to understand. And there's no other way of understanding it. There's no other way. There's no other way of understanding it. When you see it like this, Bismillah usannifu, then you understand only writing in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one else's name. For no one else. Only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Naam. That's the second benefit. And then, it is that which is suitable for the occasion. Suitable for the occasion. Right? And the Shaykh, he says, وَقَدَرْنَاهُ مُنَاسِبًا, and we made it suitable for the occasion, لِأَنَّهُ أَدَلٌ عَلَى الْمُرَادِ. He said because by making it suitable for the occasion, it is that which is more clearer in describing what is intended. It is that which is more clearer in conveying that which is intended. The Shaykh, he says, وَلَوْ قُلْنَا مَثَلًا عندما نريد أن نقرأ كتابا بسم الله نبتدئ. He said, because if we were to say, for example, right? If we were to say, for example, whenever we wanted to sit down and to read a book, if we were to say, Bismillah, we begin. Bismillah نبتدئ. Naam. The Shaykh, he says, ما يدرى بما نبتدئ. He said, if we were to say, in the name of Allah, we begin. He said, it will not be known what we're beginning. Right? If a person said, was understood by, we about to read, we said, Bismillah. Right? And he said, what's understood by that is, we begin. But it doesn't know, begin doing what? You begin reading, you begin eating, you begin what? What are you beginning to do? Right? It's not understood. So therefore, when you make it suitable for the occasion, then now it's understood exactly what is going on. So the Shaykh, he says, so therefore, if it was the same, walakin, Bismillah, aqra'u. If you say, Bismillah, I'm reading, then it's understood exactly what's going on. Right? In the name of Allah, I'm reading. You understand that? وَيَكُونُ أَدَلٌ عَلَى الْمُرَادِ. Then it is more clearer in pointing to that which is intended, from the statement, أَبْتَدِئُ bihi, or I'm beginning with it, and so on and so forth. Right? So this is why it is suitable for the occasion. So again, the Bismillah, you have the jar and the majroor, right? That is connected to a verb that is implied at the end of the sentence, and it is suitable for the situation. So when the Shaykh begins here with Bismillah, then we understand from it, Bismillah usannifu. In the name of Allah, I am writing. And the last thing we want to go over in this introductory class dealing with the Basmala is there comes a hadith, because a person will say, well, why did the Shaykh begin with the Basmala? Right? The correct opinion is that he began with the Basmala in imitating the book in the Sunnah. In imitating the book in the Sunnah. Right? Because you find the Surah, Save, Surah, Tawbah, begins with the Basmala. طيب. Also the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to write his letters and the like, he will begin with the Basmala. He will begin with the Basmala. So the ulama, when they begin with the Basmala, is for this reason of imitating the book in the Sunnah. So this is why they begin Bismillah. This is why they begin Bismillah. But there comes a hadith where it says, كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ فيه بسم الله فهو أبتر. That every affair of importance, every important matter that does not begin or is not begun therein with the name of Allah, that it is cut off. That it is cut off. Right? We don't say that this is the reason why he began with the Basmala, due to this statement. Why? Why don't we say that? We don't say that because this particular hadith is da'if. It is weak. So therefore, it has not reached the level of that which can be used as a proof and evidence. Right? Because a da'if hadith is not what? It's not hujjah. It's not a proof and evidence. It's not a proof or evidence. It's very important. So we don't say it's because of this hadith. This hadith is da'if. Rawahu ibn Majah has been collected by Imam ibn Majah or Imam Ahmad. وضعف Al-Albani, and Imam Al-Albani, he graded the hadith as being da'if, as it comes in da'if al-jami'. As it comes in da'if al-jami'. He also brings some details on why he rendered it and graded it to be da'if in the first ahadith في أوائل أحاديث الإرواء, in the first ahadith of al-Irwa. In summary, the ulama, they have mentioned why this hadith is da'if, and not just da'if, but they say it is da'if jiddan, that is very weak. This particular narration is very weak. لأنه من رواية أحمد بن محمد بن عمران المعروف بابن جندي, because it's from the narrations of an individual. I want you to write his name down. His name was Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Imran, and he was well known by Ibn Jundi. So again, his name was Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Imran, and he was well known by Ibn Jundi. طيب. I'm going to say it one more time, just to make sure everyone has his name. It was Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Imran, who was well known by Ibn Jundi. Imam al-Khatib, now we're going to get into what is said about him, why, due to him, his presence, why this hadith is da'if. Imam al-Khatib, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his famous book, Tariq, he said in his book, Tariqi, in his famous book, Tariq, he said, كان يضعف في روايته ويطعن عليه في مذهبه. He said that verily he was considered to be weak inside of his narrations, that he was considered to be weak inside of his narration. So if you read through a chain of hadith and you find him present, then that's going to be a red flag right there, providing a weakness for that particular chain. He said he was rendered to be da'if, weak in his narrations, and he was criticized due to his madhab. He was weak in his narrations and he was criticized due to his madhab. Right? And what is intended by, and he was criticized because of his madhab, fi tashayyu', because he was Shi'i. So this is what is intended, that he was criticized in his madhab. Why? Because he was a Shi'i. He was Shi'i. طيب. وقال ابن Iraq, inside of his book Tanziyah al-Shara' or Tanziyah al-Shari'ah al-Marfu'ah, inside of his tremendous book Tanziyah al-Shari'ah al-Marfu'ah, he said about him, Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Imran Ma'ruf bin Ibn Jundi, he said about him, Shi'i, that he was a Shi'i, واتهمه ابن جوزي بالوضع, that he was a Shi'i, and Ibn Jawzi, the great Imam Ibn Jawzi rahimahullah ta'ala, he accused him of wada'. Naam. And what is intended by al-wada', like you may be reading through the books of the ulama of hadith, and you find this particular phrase, bil-wada'. Bil-wada', and wada' is well dad ayn. Wada'. Naam. This means of fabricating. Of fabricating. That this individual, he used to invent narrations. He will make them up. Mawdu'. Those ahadith that are mawdu', that are fabricated, is made up. Someone just wrote something down and then tried, and then falsely attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. This is what this man used to do. He used to just write stuff and attribute it to the Prophet ﷺ, and it was a lie upon the Prophet ﷺ. He used to invent narrations. Right? He used to invent narrations. And that's just some summary about this particular narrator. So this is why, when one looks back, with this individual being inside the chain, Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Imran al-Ma'ruf bin Jundi, this is why the hadith is da'if jiddan. Why? Because he's in the chain. Da'if jiddan. So therefore, that's not a proof. That's not a proof, right? But rather the proof is in imitating the book and the sunnah. So then the Shaykh, after saying the Bismillah, he goes on to the tremendous introduction. As'alullah al-Kareem, As'alullah al-Kareem, Rabb al-Arsh al-Azim, an yatawallaka fi dunya wal-akhirah. I ask Allah, the most noble, the Lord of the tremendous throne, to safeguard and protect you in this world and the next. Wa Bismillah ta'ala, in the next class, we will begin going over this particular sentence, inshallah ta'ala. Fa naktafi bihadha al-qadar. Wa sallallahu sallam ala nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa jazakumullahu khayra. Wa illa al-liqa. استودعكم الله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.